The flight attendant's smirk vanished as Jasmine Thompson slid her business card across the counter. "I'm not just a passenger," she said quietly. "I own 51% of this airline." The terminal fell silent. 20 minutes earlier, this same woman had shoved Jasmine for simply asking where the first-class lounge was. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling, this story will resonate with you. Hit that like button and subscribe now to follow Jasmine's incredible journey from being disrespected to transforming an entire industry. The truth behind what happened that day at the airport will leave you speechless. Jasmine Thompson's journey to airline ownership began far from the executive boardrooms of the aviation industry. As a young girl growing up in Baltimore's working-class neighborhood, she would watch planes soar overhead, dreaming of a future among the clouds. Her single mother worked double shifts as a hospital orderly to ensure Jasmine received the best education possible. Her academic brilliance earned her a full scholarship to Howard University, where she graduated at the top of her class in aviation engineering. Her professors recognized something special in Jasmine. Not just her technical brilliance, but her visionary approach to solving complex problems that had plagued the industry for decades. "I remember thinking the sky was the limit," Jasmine would later recall in interviews. "I believed talent and hard work would be enough." Reality hit hard during her first job interview at Atlantic Airways, when the hiring manager glanced at her resume and asked, "Did someone help you write this?" The implication was clear. He couldn't believe a young black woman had achieved such academic credentials on her own. Despite this initial setback, Jasmine secured an entry-level position at Continental Skyways, one of the country's largest carriers. For 15 grueling years, she watched as less qualified colleagues, almost always white men, received promotions she had earned through exceptional performance. Time after time, she was told she wasn't executive material or lacked the right leadership qualities. The breaking point came when Jasmine developed a revolutionary fuel efficiency technology that could save airlines millions of dollars annually while reducing carbon emissions. She presented her findings to the executive board with meticulous research and projections. The technology was rejected without serious consideration. 6 months later, she discovered the company had implemented a nearly identical system. Credited to her white male supervisor who had barely understood her original proposal. "That night I cried until there were no tears left," Jasmine confided to her closest friend Alicia. "Then I made a decision that would change everything." Fate intervened when Jasmine's grandmother passed away, leaving her a modest inheritance of $75,000. Instead of buying a house or investing conservatively, Jasmine took a massive risk. She founded Thompson Aviation Technologies, initially as a consulting firm specializing in efficiency improvements and technological innovation. Her reputation for brilliant solutions slowly spread through the industry, though many companies hired her firm without realizing a black woman was behind the cutting-edge advancements. Jasmine worked 18-hour days, sleeping on the office couch, pouring every ounce of energy into building her company from nothing. After 4 years of strategic growth, opportunity knocked in the form of failing Meridian Airlines. Once a respected regional carrier, Meridian was on the verge of bankruptcy, its stock price plummeting after years of mismanagement and declining service. While major airlines circled like vultures, hoping to pick apart Meridian's valuable routes and airport slots after its collapse, Jasmine saw something different: potential. Using her company's profits and securing additional investment from believers in her vision, she made the move that the industry considered suicidal, acquiring 51% of Meridian Airlines. "Everyone thought I was crazy," Jasmine admitted during a rare personal interview. The headlines were brutal. "Unknown engineer buys failing airline, Thompson throws away success on doomed carrier." What the industry didn't understand was Jasmine's strategic vision. She immediately implemented her proprietary fuel efficiency technology, cutting operational costs by 22% in the first year. She revamped routes, focusing on underserved communities, and rebuilt the company culture from the ground up. The emotional toll of her journey was immense. Jasmine made a controversial decision early on. She kept her ownership private from most employees, serving officially as Chief Innovation Officer, rather than CEO. She wanted to transform the airline's culture authentically, without employees simply changing behavior because the boss was watching. This decision allowed her to experience her own airline as customers did. She regularly flew as a normal passenger, sometimes in economy, sometimes in first class, observing operations firsthand and making notes for improvements. "I want to know exactly how our passengers feel," she explained to her trusted inner circle. "Especially passengers who look like me. Are they treated with the same respect? Do they receive the same level of service? The only way to know is to experience it myself." Through 5 years of strategic transformation, Meridian Airlines rose from industry laughingstock to a formidable competitor in the regional market. Profitability returned, employee satisfaction scores doubled, and customer complaints dropped by 60%. Industry analysts who had predicted Jasmine's failure now scrambled to explain Meridian's miraculous turnaround. What they didn't know was that the miracle was Jasmine herself, and her personal commitment to changing aviation's culture of discrimination from the inside. A commitment that would soon be tested in ways she never imagined. The morning that would change everything began like many others for Jasmine. She arrived at Atlanta International Airport at 5:30 a.m. for her flight to Chicago, where she was scheduled to inspect a potential maintenance facility acquisition. As always during these secret boss experiences, she dressed casually, faded jeans, comfortable sneakers, and her beloved Howard University sweatshirt, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. To most observers, she looked like any other early morning traveler, perhaps a professor or graduate student. Certainly not the majority owner of the airline whose ticket counter she approached. "Good morning," Jasmine said warmly to the check-in agent, whose name tag read Darla. She presented her ID and first-class ticket. Darla glanced at the ticket, then at Jasmine, then back at the ticket, eyebrows rising slightly. "First class. Are you sure?" Jasmine nodded, maintaining her pleasant expression despite the familiar sting. "Yes, seat 2A. "I'll need to see some additional ID," Darla said, despite having already verified Jasmine's driver's license. Jasmine complied, keeping her observations mental rather than voiced. She noticed the white businessman checking in at the next counter wasn't asked for additional verification, despite also holding a first-class ticket. After reluctantly issuing her boarding pass, Darla added, "First time flying first class?" The question, dripping with assumption, was one Jasmine had heard countless times. "No," she replied simply, deciding not to engage further. As she moved away from the counter, Jasmine overheard Darla cheerfully directing a white passenger to the airline's first-class lounge, providing detailed instructions and highlighting the complimentary breakfast offerings. This was information Jasmine had not received, despite being equally entitled to the lounge amenities. Jasmine checked her watch. With 2 hours until boarding, the first-class lounge would be a comfortable place to review documents and prepare for her meeting. She approached the nearest information desk, staffed by a flight attendant whose name tag identified her as Bridget Wilson. "Excuse me," Jasmine said politely. "Could you direct me to the first-class lounge?" Bridget barely glanced up from her computer. "The first-class lounge is for first-class passengers only," she stated flatly. "Yes, I understand. I have a first-class ticket," Jasmine explained, sliding her boarding pass across the counter. Bridget gave the pass a cursory glance. "Are you sure you're at the right airline? Our lounges are exclusive." The implication was clear, and all too familiar. Before Jasmine could respond, a white businessman in a tailored suit approached the desk. "Pardon me, where can I find the first-class lounge?" he asked. The transformation in Bridget was immediate and striking. Her previously dismissive expression blossomed into a warm, professional smile. "Of course, sir. Let me show you exactly where to go." What happened next would later be captured on both security cameras and bystander cell phones. As Bridget stepped out from behind the counter to personally escort the businessman, she physically pushed Jasmine aside with her elbow, a deliberate motion that sent Jasmine stumbling back, nearly losing her balance. "Excuse me," Jasmine said, steadying herself. "That was unnecessary." Bridget turned, her smile vanishing. "You'll need to step back and wait your turn." "I was already being helped," Jasmine pointed out calmly. "And there was no need to push me." "I did not push you," Bridget said loudly enough for others to hear. "Please don't create a scene." The businessman, looking uncomfortable, interjected. "Actually, I'm happy to wait. She was here first." Bridget ignored him, continuing to address Jasmine with increasing hostility. "If you have a problem, you can speak to a supervisor." "I would like to do that, please," Jasmine responded, maintaining her composure despite the growing knot of anger in her stomach. Bridget's laugh was short and dismissive. "Good luck with that. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual customers to assist." She turned her back on Jasmine and continued her conversation with the businessman, who was now visibly embarrassed. Jasmine took a deep breath, weighing her options. As a black woman, she was intimately familiar with the risks of being perceived as angry or causing trouble in public spaces. As an airline owner, she had the power to address this situation immediately, but revealing her identity now would undermine years of careful observation of her company's true culture. Before she could decide on her next move, Bridget was speaking into a radio. "Security to Information Desk 3. Disruptive passenger requiring assistance." Jasmine felt her heart rate quicken. "I'm not being disruptive. I simply asked for directions and objected to being pushed." Several nearby passengers had begun recording the interaction on their phones, sensing the tension escalating. Some wore expressions of concern, others uncomfortable fascination. A few nodded in knowing solidarity with Jasmine, fellow travelers who had experienced similar treatment. Within minutes, 2 security officers were approaching, one white, one black. Their faces already set in expressions of judgment before hearing a single word. The terminal that had been filled with the normal hum of airport activity fell into an uneasy quiet as travelers watched the confrontation unfold. For Jasmine, the moment represented everything she had been fighting against throughout her career: the automatic assumptions, the dismissal of her humanity, the casual cruelty justified as procedure. As the security officers reached the desk, Jasmine made a decision that would set in motion events that would transform not just her airline, but an entire industry's approach to racial bias. The security officers arrived with an air of preemptive authority, their body language making it clear they had already decided who was at fault in this situation. Their name badges identified them as Michael Parker, a heavy-set white man in his 50s, and James Reynolds, a black man around 30 who seemed determined to project toughness. "What seems to be the problem here?" Officer Parker addressed Bridget directly, positioning his body to face her while keeping Jasmine in his peripheral vision, a subtle but clear indication of who he considered the credible party. "This woman is causing a disturbance," Bridget explained, her voice taking on a tremulous quality that hadn't been present moments before. "She became aggressive when I was assisting another passenger." "That's not true," Jasmine interjected calmly. "I simply asked for directions to the first-class lounge, and she physically pushed me aside to help someone else." Officer Parker turned toward Jasmine, his expression skeptical. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to lower your voice." "My voice is perfectly calm," Jasmine replied, conscious of the crowd forming around them. At least 3 passengers had their phones out, recording the incident. One woman nodded encouragingly at Jasmine. "Do you have a first-class ticket?" Officer Reynolds asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. Jasmine handed over her boarding pass. "Yes, I do. Seat 2A. Reynolds examined the pass with exaggerated scrutiny, as if searching for evidence of forgery. "And how did you obtain this ticket?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implication. Would a white passenger ever be asked to explain how they legally acquired a ticket? "I purchased it," just like any other passenger," Jasmine replied, maintaining her composure despite the growing indignation she felt. "Look, there's been a misunderstanding. I simply asked for directions, and instead of providing them, your employee pushed me and called security." "She's exaggerating," Bridget cut in. "I barely brushed past her, and she started making accusations." A middle-aged white woman in the crowd spoke up. "That's not what happened. I saw the whole thing. The attendant definitely pushed her." Officer Parker shot the woman a warning look. "Ma'am, please step back. This doesn't concern you." The crowd was growing larger, with murmurs of discontent spreading. The situation was quickly becoming exactly what Jasmine had hoped to avoid, a public spectacle. Yet she couldn't simply walk away, not when the principle mattered so much. A harried-looking man in a Meridian Airlines management uniform hurried toward the group. His nameplate identified him as Trevor Phillips, regional manager. Jasmine recognized him from quarterly reports but was certain he wouldn't know her by sight. "What's happening here?" Phillips asked, eyes darting nervously between the security officers, Bridget, and the growing crowd of onlookers. "Sir, we have a situation with a disruptive passenger," Officer Parker began. "I'm not disruptive," Jasmine corrected firmly. "I was physically pushed by your employee when asking for information I'm entitled to as a first-class passenger." Phillips barely glanced at Jasmine before addressing Bridget. "What happened?" Bridget launched into her version of events, now adding embellishments that painted Jasmine as increasingly aggressive. "She demanded special treatment and became hostile when I was helping other customers." "That's simply not true," Jasmine said. "And there are witnesses and likely security footage that will confirm my account." Phillips finally turned his full attention to Jasmine, his expression a mixture of impatience and dismissal. "Ma'am, perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private." "I'm perfectly comfortable having this conversation right here," Jasmine replied, understanding that somewhere private often meant somewhere without witnesses. Phillips leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I don't think you understand. Either we discuss this privately, or I'll have to ask security to escort you from the terminal. Your choice." Jasmine weighed her options. Making a scene would accomplish nothing productive, but neither would allowing herself to be silenced and dismissed. "Fine," she agreed finally. "But I want it noted that I'm cooperating fully, despite being the wronged party here." With a curt nod, Phillips gestured for the security officers to lead the way. As they walked through the terminal toward the airport security offices, Jasmine was acutely aware of how the tableau appeared to onlookers, a black woman being escorted away by security while a white airline employee watched with satisfaction. They entered a small, windowless room with a metal table and 4 chairs, an interrogation room in all but name. Officer Parker motioned for Jasmine to sit while he and Reynolds remained standing. Phillips closed the door behind them. "Now," Phillips began, his tone condescending, "why don't you explain why you felt the need to create such a disturbance in my terminal?" Jasmine took a deep breath. "I'd like to be very clear about what happened. I approached your information desk to ask directions to the first-class lounge, which I am entitled to access as a first-class passenger. Your employee, Bridget Wilson, immediately treated me with suspicion and dismissal. When another passenger, a white man, asked the same question, she not only answered him politely but physically pushed me aside to assist him." "I find that hard to believe," Phillips interrupted. "Bridget is one of our most experienced staff members." "Experience doesn't preclude bias," Jasmine countered. "When I objected to being pushed, she called security rather than simply apologizing or providing the information I requested." Officer Reynolds spoke up. "We're going to need to see some ID. May I ask why?" "I've already shown my boarding pass and ID at check-in. Standard procedure when there's a security incident," Parker stated flatly. Jasmine removed her driver's license from her wallet and handed it over. "This is not a security incident. This is a customer service failure and potentially a case of racial discrimination." Phillips scoffed. Let's not play the race card here. The phrase, so familiar to Jasmine and other Black Americans who dared to name their experiences, landed like a slap. She fixed Phillips with a steady gaze. I'm not playing anything. I'm stating what happened. We'll also need to check your bags, Reynolds added, ignoring her response. On what grounds? Jasmine asked, her patience wearing thin. Security protocol, Parker replied vaguely. Jasmine knew her rights, but she also knew how quickly situations like this could escalate if she asserted them too forcefully. She handed over her small carry-on bag. This is completely unnecessary, but I have nothing to hide. As Reynolds rummaged through her bag, Parker continued questioning her about her travel plans, her reason for visiting Chicago, her occupation, all information irrelevant to the incident at hand. Jasmine answered truthfully but vaguely, not yet ready to reveal her full identity. I'm an executive in the aviation industry. I'm traveling to Chicago for business meetings. Reynolds pulled out her wallet, which she had placed in her bag after showing her ID. Need to verify the contents, he said, opening it before she could object. As he flipped through the compartments, his expression suddenly changed. He pulled out a card, not her driver's license, but her executive access card for Meridian Airlines headquarters. The card didn't state her position but featured the company logo, her photograph, and a high-level security clearance code. What's this? Reynolds asked, a note of uncertainty entering his voice for the first time. Phillips leaned forward to examine the card, his face paling slightly. That's an executive access card for our corporate headquarters. Where did you get this? Jasmine allowed herself the smallest of smiles. I was hoping to resolve this situation without having to play what you might call the owner card, but you're leaving me little choice. The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly as the first seed of doubt was planted in the minds of the men who had been so certain of their authority just moments before. Jasmine reached slowly into the inner pocket of her Howard University sweatshirt and withdrew a business card. She placed it carefully on the metal table, turning it to face Phillips. The card was simple but elegant, featuring the Meridian Airlines logo and the name, Jasmine Thompson, followed by majority owner and chief executive officer. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. Phillips stared at the card, then at Jasmine, his complexion now ashen. Officer Parker leaned forward to examine the card, disbelief written across his features. Officer Reynolds took an involuntary step backward. This is some kind of joke, Phillips finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. I assure you it's not, Jasmine replied calmly. I own 51% of Meridian Airlines. I've kept my position relatively private for the past 5 years to allow me to experience our service as customers do. Today's experience has been illuminating. Phillips reached for his phone with trembling hands. I need to verify this. Please do, Jasmine said. Call Charles Westbrook, chairman of the board. His private number is on the back of my card. As Phillips stepped into the corner to make the call, Jasmine turned her attention to the security officers. Gentlemen, I want to be clear about something. This isn't just about me. If I'm treated this way as a first-class passenger, how are other black travelers treated? What happens to those who don't have the power to demand accountability? Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. Parker stared at a point on the wall, avoiding eye contact. Phillips returned, his face now a mask of panic poorly disguised as professional concern. Ms. Thompson, I can't apologize enough for this misunderstanding. If I had known who you were, that's precisely the problem, Jasmine interrupted. Respect shouldn't be contingent on status or position. Every passenger deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of who they are or what they look like. Of course, Phillips agreed quickly. I completely agree. This situation is not representative of our airline's values. Isn't it, though? Jasmine challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems entirely representative of systemic issues within our corporate culture. Issues I've been working to address since acquiring this airline. She stood, straightening her sweatshirt. I want Bridget Wilson brought in here. Now. Phillips hesitated only briefly before nodding to Officer Parker, who left the room immediately. Ms. Thompson, Phillips began again, I hope we can resolve this situation discreetly. There's no need for this incident to become a larger issue. Jasmine's expression hardened. This incident already is a larger issue. It's a symptom of a culture that needs to change. The door opened, and Bridget Wilson entered, followed by Officer Parker. Her confident demeanor faltered when she saw the changed atmosphere in the room. Her eyes darted from Philip's pale face to Jasmine's composed presence at the head of the table. Bridget, Philip said, his voice strained, I'd like to introduce you to Jasmine Thompson, the majority owner and CEO of Meridian Airlines. The blood drained from Bridget's face. That's not possible. The owner is, me, Jasmine finished simply. I am the owner. And I'm deeply troubled by what happened today. Bridget's shock quickly transformed into defensive anger. If you're really the owner, why didn't you say something? You were trying to trap me, to set me up. I didn't need to set you up, Jasmine replied evenly. I simply asked for the same service any first-class passenger should receive. You made assumptions based on my appearance and treated me accordingly. That's the issue we're addressing. This isn't fair, Bridget protested, looking to Phillips for support. How was I supposed to know? You weren't supposed to know, Jasmine said. That's the point. No passenger should be pushed, dismissed, or have security called on them for simply asking a question, regardless of who they are. As the confrontation continued, a thought occurred to Jasmine. She turned to Phillips. I want to see the security footage of the incident. And I want to know if other passengers have filed complaints about similar treatment. Phillips winced. The security cameras in that area are operational. As for complaints, there may have been some incidents reported. How many? Jasmine pressed. I'd have to check the records, Phillips hedged. I want those records on my desk by tomorrow morning, Jasmine instructed. Every complaint related to discriminatory treatment from the past 2 years. News of what was happening had begun spreading throughout the terminal. Jasmine's phone buzzed with messages from her executive team, who had already been alerted to the situation. Social media was beginning to pick up on the story, with videos from witnesses accumulating thousands of views by the minute. In the middle of this unfolding crisis, Jasmine made an unexpected decision. She turned to Bridget, who now stood rigid with fear and defiance. Ms. Wilson, I'm not going to fire you today. Bridget's expression registered confusion. Firing you would be easy, Jasmine continued. But it wouldn't address the systemic issues at play. Instead, you're going to be part of the solution. You'll be the first participant in a new comprehensive training program we're going to develop, one that addresses unconscious bias and ensures every employee understands that discrimination has no place in this company. Are you feeling the tension rising in this confrontation? Have you ever witnessed or experienced similar treatment while traveling? Comment number 1 if you believe Jasmine is handling this situation correctly, or number 2 if you think she should take more severe action against Bridget. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about overcoming discrimination. What do you think will happen next as news of this incident spreads throughout the airport and beyond? Will the other executives stand with Jasmine, or will they try to protect the status quo? The news spread through Meridian Airlines' corporate structure like wildfire. Within 30 minutes of Jasmine revealing her identity, her phone was inundated with calls and messages from board members, executives, and the company's public relations team. As Jasmine exited the security office, her personal assistant, Damon Wright, was waiting in the terminal, having rushed to the airport as soon as he received word of the incident. Your flight to Chicago has been cancelled, he informed her, falling into step beside her. The board has called an emergency meeting. They're assembling in the executive conference room at headquarters. Who called the meeting? Jasmine asked, noting the growing number of curious onlookers recognizing her from the viral videos now circulating online. "Alexander Hayes," Damon replied, referring to the vice president of operations, a man who had consistently resisted Jasmine's attempts to implement diversity initiatives. "He's positioning it as a crisis management session." Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. "Of course he is. Who's attending?" "Full board, all C-suite executives, legal counsel, and PR. They're expecting you in an hour." "Let them wait too," Jasmine decided. "I have something more important to do first." Despite Damon's questioning look, Jasmine made her way to the airline's main customer service center in the terminal. There, she requested access to the customer complaint database, using her executive override to bypass the usual approval processes. What she found confirmed her suspicions. Over the past 18 months, there had been 73 formal complaints alleging discriminatory treatment by Meridian staff. 68 had been filed by passengers of color. 62 had been marked resolved with no disciplinary action or follow-up training. Most troubling of all, Bridget Wilson's name appeared in 11 separate complaints. "They've been burying these," Jasmine said quietly to Damon. "Categorizing them as customer satisfaction issues rather than discrimination complaints to keep them off the executive dashboards." She made one more stop before heading to headquarters, the employee break room. There, away from the public eye, she introduced herself to the shocked staff members present, many of whom had never seen the elusive owner in person. "I want to hear from you," she told them simply. "Not the official line, not what you think management wants to hear. The truth about what you've seen and experienced while working here." After initial hesitation, the stories began to flow. Flight attendants described racial coding systems used to warn each other about black passengers who might be difficult. Gate agents admitted to extra scrutiny of black travelers' documents. Several employees of color shared their own experiences of being passed over for promotions or assigned to less desirable routes. By the time Jasmine finally arrived at headquarters, she was armed with more than just her personal experience. She had evidence of a pervasive culture problem that could no longer be denied or minimized. The executive conference room fell silent as she entered. 14 people sat around a polished mahogany table, expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed hostility. Alexander Hayes stood at the head of the table, clearly having positioned himself to lead the meeting. He reluctantly stepped aside as Jasmine approached. "Jasmine," Charles Westbrook, the chairman of the board, began, "We've been discussing the unfortunate incident at the airport." "It wasn't an incident," Jasmine interrupted calmly. "It was a manifestation of systemic discrimination within our company culture. One that has been deliberately hidden from executive oversight." She placed a flash drive on the table. This contains 73 discrimination complaints from the past year and a half. Complaints that were buried, misclassified, and ignored. Victoria Langley, the head of human resources, shifted uncomfortably. "Those complaints were handled according to protocol, a protocol designed to hide rather than address the problem," Jasmine cut in. 11 complaints named the same flight attendant who pushed me today. No action was taken." Alexander Hayes cleared his throat. "While this is concerning, our immediate priority should be managing the PR situation. Videos of the interaction are trending on social media. We need to issue a statement minimizing damage to the brand." Jasmine turned to face him directly. "We will not be minimizing anything. We will be acknowledging the truth and committing to meaningful change." "Be reasonable, Jasmine," board member William Foster interjected. "One unfortunate interaction doesn't justify overhauling company policy. Perhaps you're making this more about race than it needs to be." The room fell into uncomfortable silence at Foster's words. Jasmine let the moment stretch, allowing the weight of his statement to settle over the room. "Is that what you all think?" she finally asked, looking around the table. "That I'm making this about race?" No one met her gaze directly. "Let me be absolutely clear," Jasmine continued. "This isn't about one interaction. This is about a pattern of behavior that has been documented, reported, and systematically ignored. And yes, it absolutely is about race. To suggest otherwise is either willful ignorance or deliberate deflection. She pulled up a chair and sat down, placing her hands flat on the table. Now, we have two paths forward. Either we address this honestly and implement real change, or I exercise my majority ownership to replace those who stand in the way of progress. The choice is yours. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable in its implications. As majority shareholder, Jasmine had the power to restructure the entire executive team and board if necessary. Charles Westbrook was the first to recover. What exactly are you proposing, Jasmine? A comprehensive overhaul of our approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Not just superficial training, but structural changes to hiring, promotion, customer service protocols, and complaint resolution procedures. With real accountability measures and transparent reporting. Victoria Langley frowned. That would require significant resources we will allocate, Jasmine stated firmly. This isn't negotiable. As the discussion continued, Jasmine's assistant discreetly entered the room and passed her a note. She read it quickly, her expression revealing nothing. It seems we have another situation to address, she announced to the room. I've just been informed that Bridget Wilson is giving an interview to Channel 8 News in the terminal, presenting herself as the victim in today's events. Alexander Hayes stood quickly. I'll have PR shut it down immediately. No, Jasmine countered. Let her speak. Attempting to silence her will only feed the narrative that we're hiding something. Besides, the security footage tells the truth. Speaking of which, she turned to the company's legal counsel. I want all security footage preserved and a statement prepared acknowledging what happened and outlining our commitment to change. No equivocation, no corporate doublespeak. As the meeting progressed into its second hour, divisions began to emerge among the leadership. Some, like Hayes and Foster, continued to push for damage control and minimal action. Others, sensing the shifting winds, aligned themselves with Jasmine's vision for transformation. What none of them yet realized was that Jasmine had been preparing for this moment since she first acquired the airline. The incident with Bridget hadn't created her determination to address discrimination, it had simply accelerated the timeline for the changes she had always intended to implement. As evening fell, Jasmine's phone buzzed with notification after notification. The story had gone national. Civil rights organizations were issuing statements. Competitors were attempting to capitalize on Meridian's public relations disaster while quietly examining their own vulnerabilities to similar exposures. What had begun as a simple request for directions to a first-class lounge had evolved into a pivotal moment not just for Jasmine and Meridian Airlines, but potentially for the entire industry's approach to racial bias. When she finally left headquarters late that night, Jasmine found Damon waiting for her in the lobby. It's going to be a battle, she told him wearily. He nodded. But one worth fighting. The question is, Jasmine mused, how many of them will fight with me, and how many will fight against me? The answer would come sooner than she expected. The following morning, Jasmine arrived at company headquarters at 6 a.m., hours before most executives would appear. She wanted time to prepare for what she knew would be a day of confrontation and resistance. The building was quiet, populated only by security personnel and early shift employees who did double takes as they recognized their elusive owner. Damon met her in her rarely used executive office, armed with updates and coffee. Social media hasn't slowed down, he reported. The hashtag Meridian discrimination is trending nationally. On the positive side, hashtag Jasmine Thompson stand-up is also gaining traction. Jasmine nodded, scanning the overnight reports. And internally? That's where it gets interesting, Damon said, pulling up an email on his tablet. This was sent at 2 a.m. to all executive staff from Alexander Hayes. The email was carefully worded but clear in its intent, a rallying cry for maintaining company stability and addressing concerns proportionately without overreaction. It proposed a unified executive response to present to Jasmine, essentially an attempt to form a coalition against her proposed changes. Who's aligned with him? Jasmine asked. Based on reply alls, at least 6 executives and 3 board members, Damon answered. They're meeting for breakfast right now at the Capitol Grill to strategize. Jasmine allowed herself a small smile. Amateur move. They've just identified themselves. Her first meeting of the day was with Victoria Langley from HR and the legal team, ostensibly to review the discrimination complaints she'd discovered. Jasmine arrived to find Victoria alone, her usual team of HR directors conspicuously absent. The others couldn't make it on such short notice, Victoria explained unconvincingly. I see, Jasmine replied, taking a seat. Let's not waste time, Victoria. I want to understand why 73 discrimination complaints were effectively buried. Victoria's response was a masterclass in corporate deflection. Technical explanations about categorization protocols, assurances about thorough investigations, and repeated emphasis on subjective perceptions versus substantiated incidents. Jasmine listened patiently, then asked a single question: if these complaints were properly handled, why does Bridget Wilson still have a job after 11 separate incidents? Victoria hesitated before responding. Bridget has certain connections that complicated disciplinary actions. Explain. Her uncle is Robert Wilson, who owns 3% of our company and sits on the board, Jasmine finished. So complaints against her were buried to avoid upsetting a board member. Victoria didn't deny it. The pattern continued throughout the day. In meeting after meeting, Jasmine encountered resistance disguised as concern, delay tactics presented as thoroughness, and thinly veiled threats about market perception and shareholder confidence if she pushed too hard for change. By mid-afternoon, the battle lines had been clearly drawn. Alexander Hayes had assembled a faction of executives and board members opposed to Jasmine's reform agenda, while others remained cautiously neutral, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. The confrontation came to a head during a 3 p.m. strategy session. Hayes arrived with his allies, presenting what he called a reasonable alternative to Jasmine's proposed overhaul. We recommend a measured response, he explained smoothly. A public apology for the misunderstanding, a one-day sensitivity training for customer-facing staff, and a small donation to an appropriate organization to demonstrate our commitment to diversity. Jasmine studied the document he distributed. This isn't change, Alexander. It's a band-aid on a bullet wound. With all due respect, board member William Foster interjected, we believe your personal experience may be coloring your judgment about what's best for the company. The room tensed at the implication. Jasmine set the document down deliberately. Let me be very clear about something, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. I didn't become the owner of this airline by accident or inheritance. I built my company from nothing, acquired a majority stake in Meridian when everyone said it would fail, and turned it from a failing regional carrier into a profitable mid-market airline. I did not accomplish all that by allowing my judgment to be colored by anything other than facts and strategic vision. She stood, commanding the room's attention. And the facts are these: our company has a documented pattern of discrimination that has been deliberately concealed from leadership. That ends today. Hayes leaned forward. Jasmine, you need to consider the financial implications. Major changes could destabilize. I've considered them, she interrupted. And I've concluded that the cost of not changing is greater than the cost of changing. If that assessment makes some of you uncomfortable, I suggest you examine why. The meeting ended in a stalemate, but Jasmine knew the real battle was just beginning. As she returned to her office, she found a message waiting from an unfamiliar employee email address. It read simply, "Not everyone opposes you. Many of us are afraid to speak up. We're watching and hoping you succeed." Over the next few hours, similar messages trickled in, from flight attendants, gate agents, mechanics, and administrative staff. People who had witnessed discrimination but felt powerless to address it, or who had experienced it themselves but feared retaliation if they reported it. Jasmine saved each message, understanding that these silent allies might prove crucial in the fight ahead. She was considering her next move when Damon burst into her office without knocking, something he never did. "You need to see this," he said urgently, setting his tablet in front of her. On the screen was an internal financial report that had been emailed to him anonymously. It detailed a plan to artificially depress Meridian's stock price through strategic information leaks and manufactured crises, creating an opportunity for Hayes and his allies to increase their ownership stake at reduced prices. "They're trying to weaken your position," Damon explained. "If they can acquire enough shares collectively, they could challenge your majority control." Jasmine studied the document, noting the familiar phrases and financial models that confirmed its authenticity. "They're not just resisting change," she realized aloud. "They're attempting a hostile takeover." As she contemplated this new threat, her phone rang with a call from an unexpected source, Robert Wilson, Bridget's uncle and board member. "Ms. Thompson," he began without preamble, "I think it's time we had a frank conversation about my niece and your accusations." "They're not accusations, Mr. Wilson. They're documented facts, supported by security footage and multiple witnesses. Nevertheless," he continued, "I believe this situation could be resolved more amicably. My family has considerable influence in the aviation industry, as I'm sure you're aware." The implied threat wasn't subtle. Jasmine's response was equally direct, "Are you threatening me, Mr. Wilson?" "Not at all," he replied smoothly. "I'm simply suggesting that everyone's interests would be better served by a quieter resolution. Perhaps a private apology from Bridget, coupled with your public statement that the incident was exaggerated by social media." "That won't be happening," Jasmine stated firmly. "Your niece's behavior was wrong, but it's also symptomatic of larger issues within our company. Issues I intend to address, with or without your support." Wilson's tone hardened. "Without my support, you may find yourself facing significant challenges. I have friends on the board, Ms. Thompson. Friends who share my concerns about your approach. Then I suggest they prepare for a fight," Jasmine replied before ending the call. The confrontation with Wilson confirmed what Jasmine had suspected. This wasn't just about one incident or even about discrimination broadly. It was about power. Her attempts to change the company's culture threatened the comfortable status quo that had benefited the old guard for years. As evening fell, Jasmine found herself increasingly isolated within the corporate structure she owned. Her office, once a refuge, now felt like a fortress under siege. Security reports indicated unusual activity, executives accessing files they never normally reviewed, IT systems being searched, employees loyal to Jasmine being excluded from key meetings. Just after 9 p.m., as she was preparing to leave, Jasmine received a text message from an unknown number. "The board is planning an emergency session tomorrow at 8 a.m. to discuss your fitness as CEO. Hayes has secured enough proxy votes to present a serious challenge. Don't go home tonight. They have people watching your house." The warning, though anonymous, rang true given the day's events. Jasmine made a quick decision, texting Damon. "Need a secure location for an all-night strategy session. Bring Anna Martinez, Jordan Williams, and Thomas Chin. No electronic communications about location or agenda." These three executives, her chief financial officer, chief technology officer, and general counsel, were the only senior leaders she trusted completely. If she was going to survive this corporate coup attempt and preserve her vision for a transformed Meridian Airlines, she would need their help to outmaneuver her opponents. By midnight, the small group had assembled in a private room at a hotel registered under Damon's name. There, surrounded by laptops, financial reports, legal documents, and takeout containers, they began formulating their counter-strategy, not just to maintain Jasmine's control of the company, but to use this crisis as a catalyst for the changes she had always envisioned. "They think they're fighting to preserve the status quo," Jasmine told her loyal team as they worked through the night. What they don't realize is that they've just given us the perfect opportunity to transform it completely. Dawn broke over the city as Jasmine and her small team of loyal executives finalized their strategy. None of them had slept, sustained by coffee, determination, and the knowledge that the next few hours would determine not just Jasmine's future with the company, but the company's future itself. "Are we ready?" Jasmine asked, surveying the tired but resolute faces around her. Ana Martinez, the CFO, nodded. "Financially, we're solid. I've secured commitments from our 3 largest institutional investors. They're backing you, not the board. The system access records are clear," added Jordan Williams, the CTO. "Hayes and his allies have been accessing confidential files without authorization, including your personal emails. That's a clear violation of company policy and possibly federal law." Thomas Chen, the general counsel, closed his laptop with finality. "I've drafted the legal documents. The moment the board makes a move against you, we can file for injunctive relief and trigger the shareholder protections you built into the corporate charter." Jasmine took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. For 5 years, she had worked within the system, trying to change the company's culture gradually from within. Now, forced into open confrontation, she faced a choice: retreat and compromise, or push forward more boldly than she'd ever planned. As if reading her thoughts, Damon spoke up. "You could sell your shares. Walk away with hundreds of millions and start something new." The room fell silent, the possibility hanging in the air. Jasmine looked out the hotel window at the city awakening below. 5 years ago, I might have done that, she admitted. But this isn't just about me anymore. It's about every person of color who's been pushed aside, questioned, or made to feel less than. If I walk away now, what message does that send? Her phone buzzed with a text from her anonymous informant. Board meeting moved up to 7 a.m. Hayes arrived early with outside counsel. Jasmine stood, decision made. "Let's go." Instead of heading to the boardroom, however, Jasmine directed their small convoy to a different destination, the company's main operations center, where hundreds of employees were beginning the morning shift. "Before I face the board," she explained to her confused team, "I need to speak to the people who actually keep this airline running." The operations center fell into stunned silence as Jasmine walked in, flanked by her loyal executives. Most of these employees, dispatchers, schedulers, crew coordinators, had never seen the owner in person. "Good morning," Jasmine began, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "My name is Jasmine Thompson. I own Meridian Airlines, though many of you have never met me. Today, I need to be honest with you about something important." Over the next 15 minutes, Jasmine did something unprecedented in the company's history. She spoke with complete transparency about the discrimination incident, the buried complaints, and the current power struggle with the board. "This company stands at a crossroads," she concluded. "We can continue as we have been, where some passengers and employees are treated with less dignity based on the color of their skin. Or we can become the airline that leads our industry in truly equal treatment for all. I know which path I'm fighting for. But I can't do it alone." The silence that followed was broken by a single person beginning to applaud, then another, until the entire operations center was filled with the sound of support. As Jasmine turned to leave, an older black woman stepped forward, Loretta Jackson, a 30-year veteran flight dispatcher. "Ms. Thompson," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I've been here longer than anyone. Seen it all. What you're doing, it's about time. We're with you." Strengthened by this unexpected validation, Jasmine finally headed to the boardroom, arriving precisely at 7 a.m. She entered not through the main door, but through a side entrance, catching Hayes mid-sentence as he addressed the assembled board members. Clear evidence that Ms. Thompson's judgment has been compromised by personal. He stopped abruptly as Jasmine walked calmly to the head of the table. "Please continue, Alexander," she said pleasantly. "I'm interested in hearing your assessment of my judgment." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Hayes recovered quickly, his corporate mask sliding back into place. Jasmine, we were just discussing recent events and their impact on the company. I'm sure you were, she replied, taking her seat. And I'm here to discuss something as well, specifically, the coordinated attempt by several people in this room to undermine my leadership and reverse the progress we've made. Before Hayes could respond, Jasmine laid 3 documents on the table. The first is a record of unauthorized access to confidential company files by board members and executives. The second is evidence of a coordinated plan to artificially depress our stock price. The third is a list of 73 discrimination complaints that were deliberately hidden from executive review. I've provided copies to our major shareholders and relevant regulatory agencies. The shocked silence was broken by William Foster. This is outrageous. You're accusing the board of. I'm not accusing, Jasmine interrupted calmly. I'm stating facts, supported by evidence. Now, we have 2 options. We can have a very public, very damaging fight that will harm everyone associated with this company. Or. She paused, looking around the table. Or we can channel this energy into making Meridian Airlines the industry leader in both business performance and ethical treatment of all customers and employees. Robert Wilson scoffed. Pretty words, but the reality is that your handling of this situation with my niece has created a PR nightmare. Our stock is down 12%. Actually, Ana Martinez interjected, sliding forward a financial report, our bookings have increased 7% since the incident. It seems many customers appreciate a company willing to confront discrimination honestly. The debate that followed was intense, with clear divisions emerging among the board members. Some, like Hayes and Wilson, remained staunchly opposed to Jasmine's leadership. Others, sensing the shifting momentum, began to distance themselves from the opposition. The turning point came when Charles Westbrook, the chairman who had remained conspicuously quiet, finally spoke. I've been in aviation for 40 years, he said slowly. Seen companies rise and fall. What determines survival isn't avoiding problems, it's how you respond to them. He turned to Jasmine. You've made mistakes in how you've handled this, Jasmine. But your instincts about where this company, and this industry, needs to go are right. His unexpected support changed the dynamic instantly. Board members who had been fence-sitting began voicing tentative support for Jasmine's vision. Even some of Hayes' allies started backpedaling, claiming they had only wanted a more measured approach. By meeting's end, a compromise had been reached. Jasmine would remain CEO with full authority to implement her anti-discrimination initiative. In exchange, she would work with the board on the public messaging and implementation timeline. As the board members filed out, Hayes lingered, his expression unreadable. This isn't over, he said quietly. You're right, Jasmine agreed. The work of creating real change is just beginning. You can be part of it, Alexander, or you can be left behind. Your choice. Left alone in the boardroom, Jasmine finally allowed herself to feel the exhaustion of the past 36 hours. She had won this battle, but the war for the soul of her company, and perhaps the industry, was just beginning. Her phone buzzed with a text from Damon, turn on the news. Now. Jasmine found the nearest television in the executive lounge. Every major network was covering the story, but not in the way she had expected. Instead of focusing solely on the discrimination incident, they were highlighting her response, the transparency, the commitment to change, and most surprisingly, the groundswell of support from employees who had begun sharing their own stories on social media under the hashtag #MeridianTruth. As she watched, Jasmine realized that what had begun as a crisis had transformed into something unexpected, a platform for the very changes she had been quietly working toward for years. She called Damon. Get the team together. It's time to launch Sky Equality. The initiative we've been developing in secret, he asked, surprised. I thought that was planned for next year. Plans change, Jasmine replied, a new determination in her voice. Sometimes a crisis isn't just a problem to solve, it's an opportunity to transform. That night, instead of returning to her elegant high-rise apartment, Jasmine checked into a different hotel room, ordered room service, and spent hours refining the comprehensive anti-discrimination plan she had been developing for years. What had been conceived as a gradual, 5-year implementation would now be accelerated dramatically. As midnight approached, she received an unexpected call from Loretta Jackson, the veteran dispatcher. Ms. Thompson, I hope I'm not disturbing you, the older woman began. Not at all, Loretta. And please, call me Jasmine. Jasmine, then. I wanted you to know something. After you left today, something remarkable happened. People started talking, really talking, about their experiences. Not just the black employees, but everyone. Stories that had never been shared before. It was like a dam breaking. Jasmine listened, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. I've been here 30 years, Loretta continued, and I've never seen anything like it. People are ready for change, Jasmine. More ready than you might think. After the call ended, Jasmine stood at her hotel window, looking out at the city lights. For the first time since the incident with Bridget, she felt something beyond determination or righteous anger. She felt hope, fragile but real, that meaningful change might actually be possible. With that hope fueling her, she returned to her laptop and a blueprint for transformation that would come to be known throughout the industry as the Meridian Model. The grand ballroom of the Westfield Hotel, typically reserved for industry conventions and wedding receptions, had been transformed into a media center. Camera crews from every major network jostled for position as journalists from aviation trade publications mingled with reporters from mainstream news outlets. The air buzzed with speculation about what Jasmine Thompson would say in her first public address since the discrimination incident went viral. Behind the scenes, Jasmine reviewed her notes one final time as Damon provided last-minute updates. The room's at capacity, he reported. We've had to set up an overflow area in the adjoining conference room. Every major airline has sent representatives. Oh, and Bridget Wilson is doing a counterpress conference across town at the same time. Jasmine nodded, unsurprised. Let her speak. This isn't about Bridget anymore. It's about something much bigger. Charles Westbrook appeared, his expression serious. The board is concerned about some of the commitments in your speech. The financial implications of the program you're proposing are significant, Jasmine acknowledged. So is the cost of continuing as we have been. The board approved this direction, Charles. With the understanding that implementation would be gradual, he countered. Jasmine met his gaze directly. There's nothing gradual about discrimination. The people experiencing it don't get to spread it out over comfortable fiscal quarters. They live with it every day. Before Westbrook could respond, Jasmine's new head of communications signaled that it was time. With a deep breath, she stepped onto the stage, the camera flashes momentarily blinding as she approached the podium. Good morning, she began. My name is Jasmine Thompson. I am the majority owner and CEO of Meridian Airlines. 3 days ago, I was physically pushed by one of our flight attendants when I asked for directions to the first-class lounge. When I objected to this treatment, security was called. The room was utterly silent as she continued, recounting the incident without embellishment. This could be framed as an isolated incident, a single employee's mistake. That would be simpler, certainly. But it would also be false. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. What happened to me was not isolated. It was a symptom of systemic issues within our company, issues that I believe exist throughout our industry. For the next 20 minutes, Jasmine outlined what her team had discovered, the pattern of discrimination complaints, the differential treatment of passengers based on race, the lack of diversity in leadership positions, and the culture of silence that had allowed these problems to persist. As the owner of Meridian Airlines, I take full responsibility for these failures, she stated firmly. I have been working behind the scenes to change our company culture, but clearly, those efforts have been insufficient. Today, that changes. She unveiled Sky Equality, a comprehensive initiative that would transform every aspect of Meridian's operations. From hiring and promotion practices to customer service protocols, complaint resolution procedures, and leadership accountability measures. This is not a public relations exercise, Jasmine emphasized. This is a fundamental reorientation of our business around a simple principle: every person deserves to be treated with equal dignity and respect, regardless of their race, gender, religion, or any other characteristic. The financial commitment was substantial. $15 million in the first year alone for training, systems development, and implementation. The structural changes were even more significant, including an independent oversight committee with the authority to review and address discrimination complaints directly. As Jasmine concluded her presentation, the questions from the media began, some skeptical, some supportive, all probing. "Ms. Thompson, isn't this an overreaction to a single incident?" asked a reporter from Aviation Weekly. "This isn't about a single incident," Jasmine replied calmly. "It's about a pattern that has been documented and ignored for too long. My experience simply brought it into the spotlight." "How do you respond to Bridget Wilson's claim that she's being scapegoated?" came another question. Ms. Wilson made choices that day that reflect broader issues within our company culture. She's not being scapegoated. She's being held accountable, along with everyone else, including me. The questions continued for nearly an hour, ranging from technical inquiries about implementation details to personal questions about Jasmine's own experiences with discrimination throughout her career. She answered each one with the same forthright clarity, neither minimizing the challenges ahead nor exaggerating the likely outcomes. When the press conference ended, Jasmine knew it was just the beginning. Within hours, the reaction began pouring in from all quarters. Civil rights organizations praised the transparency and comprehensive approach. Industry analysts debated the financial implications, with opinions split on whether Sky Equality would prove to be a competitive advantage or a costly distraction. Competitors rushed to issue statements about their own commitment to diversity, though few matched Meridian's specific commitments. Most significant was the response from Meridian's own employees. What had begun as a trickle of support swelled into a flood as hundreds of staff members, from pilots to baggage handlers, shared their own stories and expressed support for the changes. #MeridianTruth and #SkyEquality became rallying points for a conversation that extended far beyond one airline or one incident. Not all the reaction was positive. Conservative commentators accused Jasmine of playing the race card and capitulating to woke pressure. Several board members gave anonymous quotes to the financial press expressing concern about the scope and pace of the changes. And a small but vocal group of customers threatened to boycott the airline, claiming Jasmine was creating a problem that doesn't exist. The most surprising response came from Bridget Wilson herself. After her initial counter-press conference, which had drawn minimal coverage, she requested a private meeting with Jasmine. Against the advice of her legal team, Jasmine agreed. The meeting took place in a neutral location, a small conference room at the city library. Bridget arrived alone, without her uncle or any legal representation. She looked smaller somehow, less imposing than she had at the airport information desk. "I watched your press conference," she began, her voice lacking the defensive edge Jasmine had expected. "You didn't throw me under the bus. You could have, but you didn't. This isn't about destroying individuals," Jasmine replied. "It's about changing systems." Bridget nodded slowly. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. At first, I was angry, felt like I was being unfairly targeted. But then I started reading some of the other complaints. Seeing the pattern." She met Jasmine's gaze directly for the first time. "I'm not ready to say I was wrong about everything. But I am ready to say I could have handled the situation differently." It wasn't an apology, exactly, but it was a start. Jasmine saw in Bridget's halting acknowledgement the first small evidence that real change might be possible, not just in policies and procedures, but in individual hearts and minds. As weeks passed, the implementation of sky equality began in earnest. There were early successes: a new complaint resolution system that showed promising results, increased applications from candidates of color for leadership positions, and positive feedback from passengers who noticed the difference in service quality. There were also significant challenges. Some managers resisted the changes, implementing them half-heartedly or finding ways to circumvent new requirements. Alexander Hayes continued his behind-the-scenes opposition, forming an alliance with several industry figures who feared Meridian's initiative might force similar changes at their companies. The financial markets remained skeptical, with Meridian stock fluctuating wildly as analysts debated whether sky equality would ultimately strengthen or weaken the company's competitive position. Some major corporate customers expressed concern about being associated with controversy, while others specifically chose Meridian because of its public stance against discrimination. Through it all, Jasmine maintained her focus on the long-term vision. In board meetings and investor calls, she consistently made the case that creating a truly equitable environment wasn't just morally right, it was good business. Companies that draw on diverse perspectives make better decisions, she argued during a particularly tense board meeting. Airlines that treat all passengers with equal respect earn greater loyalty. This isn't about politics. It's about excellence. The turning point in public perception came unexpectedly, through the story of Marcus Jenkins, a black executive who had been traveling on a competitor airline when he experienced discrimination remarkably similar to what Jasmine had faced. Unlike Jasmine, he had no ownership leverage, and the airline's response had been a formulaic apology and voucher for future travel. Jenkins' story went viral, creating a stark contrast with Meridian's comprehensive approach. Aviation journalists began referring to discrimination incidents as either pre-Meridian or post-Meridian responses, with the latter becoming the gold standard for corporate accountability. 6 months after the incident with Bridget, Jasmine was invited to give the keynote address at the Global Aviation Summit, the industry's most prestigious gathering. Standing before the leaders of every major airline in the world, she didn't focus on Meridian's journey or her personal experience. Instead, she presented data, hard numbers showing how sky equality had affected Meridian's performance. Customer satisfaction scores had increased by 22%. Employee retention had improved, particularly among staff of color. Complaint rates had dropped significantly. And most convincingly for the profit-focused audience, revenue had begun trending upward as passengers increasingly chose Meridian for its service quality and values alignment. What began as a response to discrimination has evolved into a competitive advantage, Jasmine concluded. It turns out that treating people with equal dignity isn't just right, it's smart business. As she left the stage to resounding applause, Jasmine knew that true industry-wide change would take years, not months. Some companies would adopt similar measures out of genuine commitment, others out of competitive necessity, and some would resist until forced by regulation or market pressure. But something fundamental had shifted. The conversation was no longer about whether discrimination in aviation was a problem worth addressing, but about how best to address it. And that, Jasmine reflected as she returned to her seat, was progress worth celebrating. That evening, as she prepared for her flight home, Jasmine received a text message from an unfamiliar number. "I didn't believe change was possible until you showed it could be done. Thank you." A Meridian pilot, who no longer fears using her accent on the radio, it was a small victory in a long campaign, but to Jasmine, it meant everything. 1 year to the day after the incident that had thrust Jasmine Thompson and Meridian Airlines into the national spotlight, a very different scene unfolded at Atlanta International Airport. The same terminal that had witnessed Jasmine being pushed aside and questioned now hosted a celebration marking the official completion of Sky Equality's first phase implementation. The information desk where Bridget Wilson had once dismissed Jasmine had been transformed into an Equity Ambassador station, staffed by employees specifically trained to ensure all passengers received equal treatment and assistance. Above it hung a plaque commemorating the incident that had catalyzed change, inscribed with the words that had become Meridian's new motto: "Dignity is not a privilege. It is a right." Jasmine moved through the terminal, greeting employees and passengers with the easy confidence of someone who no longer needed to conceal her identity. The past year had aged her in some ways, new strands of gray in her hair, fine lines around her eyes from countless late nights, but had also imbued her with a quiet authority that commanded respect without demanding it. The celebration was not just for show. The numbers told a compelling story about Sky Equality's impact. Discrimination complaints down by 78%, employee satisfaction at record highs, passenger loyalty metrics exceeding industry standards across all demographic groups. Most surprising to industry skeptics, Meridian's stock price had risen 27% over the year, outperforming every major competitor. What had begun as a crisis management initiative had evolved into a genuine competitive advantage. Travelers, particularly those from minority groups who had long experienced differential treatment, were choosing Meridian specifically because of its commitment to equal dignity for all passengers. The centerpiece of the day's events was the graduation ceremony for the inaugural class of Sky Equality Certified staff, 300 employees who had completed an intensive training program focused on recognizing and addressing both overt and subtle forms of discrimination. The certification had quickly become a prestigious credential within the company, with employees competing for limited spots in each training cohort. Among the graduates was a face Jasmine had not expected to see, Bridget Wilson. The flight attendant's journey over the past year had been complicated. After initially playing the victim in media appearances, she had gradually begun to reckon with her actions and their broader implications. Her participation in the certification program had been voluntary, undertaken without publicity or special recognition. As Bridget accepted her certification, she and Jasmine exchanged a look of mutual acknowledgement, not friendship, exactly, but a shared recognition of how far they had both come. For Jasmine, seeing Bridget among the graduates was powerful evidence that people could indeed change when given the opportunity and motivation to do so. The ceremony concluded with Jasmine's address to the new graduates, a speech that would later be quoted in business schools and corporate training programs across the country. 1 year ago, in this very terminal, I experienced what countless travelers of color experience every day, the assumption that I didn't belong, that I wasn't entitled to the same respect as others, she began. What made my experience different wasn't the discrimination itself, but my position to do something about it. She paused, looking out at the diverse faces of the graduates. The true measure of our success isn't what happens when the owner experiences discrimination. It's what happens when anyone experiences it, from the first-time flyer in economy to the frequent traveler in first class. Today, I can say with confidence that at Meridian Airlines, that measure is finally one we can be proud of. Following the ceremony, Jasmine had arranged a more intimate gathering at Meridian's headquarters for the employees who had been crucial to Sky Equality's implementation. Among them was Loretta Jackson, the veteran dispatcher whose late-night call had given Jasmine hope during the darkest moments of the crisis. "I'm retiring next month," Loretta told Jasmine during a quiet moment. 42 years in aviation. Never thought I'd see a day like this. Will you miss it? Jasmine asked. Loretta smiled. Parts of it. But mostly, I'm just glad I stayed long enough to see things change. To know that my granddaughter could work here someday and be judged by her abilities, not her skin color. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Thomas Chen, Jasmine's general counsel, with news that cast a shadow over the day's celebrations. Alexander Hayes has made his move, Thomas reported quietly. He's formed a new investment group with Robert Wilson and several other former board members. They're trying to acquire enough shares to challenge your control. Jasmine absorbed this information calmly. Hayes had resigned from Meridian 6 months earlier, after it became clear that his opposition to Sky Equality had left him isolated within the executive team. His departure had been presented as a career change publicly, but everyone inside the company understood it as a defeat. They're positioning it as a return to traditional airline values and freedom from political agendas, Thomas continued. Their regulatory filings suggest they've secured financial backing from several conservative investment funds. A year earlier, this news would have sent Jasmine into crisis mode. Now, she merely nodded thoughtfully. Forward me the details. We'll discuss it tomorrow. Her measured response wasn't indifference, it was confidence. Meridian's financial performance had never been stronger, its corporate culture never healthier. Hayes and his allies were fighting yesterday's battle, still believing that Meridian's commitment to equality was a vulnerability rather than a strength. As the gathering concluded, Jasmine found herself approached by a young black woman in a newly minted flight attendant uniform. She couldn't have been more than 23 or 24, her expression a mixture of nervousness and determination. "Ms. Thompson. I'm Kiana Johnson. I just wanted to thank you personally." Her voice trembled slightly. "I applied to 5 different airlines after graduation. 4 rejected me. Meridian was the only one where I felt seen for my abilities, not just my appearance." Jasmine smiled warmly. "I'm glad you're here, Kiana. How are you finding the job so far?" "Challenging," Kiana admitted. "But in a good way. And it feels different here. When I tell other black women where I work, they nod like they understand. Meridian means something now." Later that evening, Jasmine prepared for her first flight as a regular passenger since the incident a year earlier. She had deliberately chosen the same route, the same class of service, even requesting the same seat number. The symmetry felt important, a way of measuring how far they had come. As she approached the check-in counter, she was greeted with the same professional courtesy extended to every passenger. Her first-class status was acknowledged without question. Directions to the lounge were provided unprompted, with no hint of suspicion about whether she belonged there. In the first-class lounge, a flight attendant approached with a warm smile. "Ms. Thompson. We've been expecting you. Can I get you anything while you wait for boarding?" The recognition wasn't because of her ownership, her photograph wasn't displayed in employee areas, and many newer staff wouldn't know her by sight. It was simply good customer service, the kind now extended to all passengers regardless of appearance. "Just water, thank you," Jasmine replied, settling into a comfortable chair. As she observed the lounge, she noticed something that would have been unimaginable a year earlier, the natural diversity of both passengers and staff. No one was being treated with extra scrutiny or dismissed with subtle condescension. The atmosphere was one of genuine respect and professionalism. Boarding the flight provided the final confirmation of transformation. The crew greeted her the same way they greeted every passenger, with genuine warmth and attentiveness. Her seat neighbor, an elderly white businessman, chatted amiably with both her and the black flight attendant serving their section, without a hint of the differential treatment Jasmine had observed countless times in the past. It wasn't perfect, no company culture changes completely in just 1 year. There would still be incidents, complaints, and improvements needed. But the fundamental shift was undeniable. What had begun as a painful confrontation had evolved into something Jasmine had dreamed of but never fully believed possible, an airline where dignity truly wasn't a privilege, but a right. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Jasmine opened her laptop to review the preliminary details of Hayes' attempted challenge to her control. The financial analysis confirmed what she already knew: his effort was likely to fail. Meridian's success had made its stock too expensive for his investment group to acquire in sufficient quantities, and current shareholders were reluctant to sell given the company's strong performance. More tellingly, Hayes had fundamentally misunderstood what Meridian had become. He still saw sky equality as a costly social program, a concession to political pressure. What he failed to recognize was that it had transformed into a core business strategy, creating measurable value through improved service, increased loyalty, and enhanced reputation. Closing her laptop, Jasmine gazed out the window at the clouds below. The aviation industry had been her passion since childhood, when she would watch planes soar overhead from her Baltimore neighborhood. Never in those childhood dreams had she imagined owning an airline, let alone using that ownership to challenge entrenched patterns of discrimination. Yet here she was, having navigated corporate politics, public scrutiny, and personal attacks to create lasting change. The journey had been far from easy, with moments of doubt, fear, and exhaustion that had tested her resolve to its limits. What sustained her through those moments wasn't just determination or principle, but the growing evidence that change was not only possible but profoundly beneficial, for passengers, for employees, for the business itself. The data was undeniable. Treating people with equal dignity wasn't just the right thing to do, it was the smart thing to do. 6 months later, Jasmine stood on stage at the industry's annual Excellence in Aviation Award ceremony, accepting the prestigious Innovation Award for Sky Equality. The program had expanded beyond Meridian to become an industry certification that airlines could earn by meeting rigorous standards for equitable treatment and inclusive practices. When I entered this industry, I was told repeatedly that certain things couldn't change, Jasmine said in her acceptance speech. That patterns of differential treatment were too deeply entrenched, too normalized to address. What we've proven at Meridian isn't just that those patterns can change, it's that everyone benefits when they do. The most powerful moment of the evening came not during the ceremony itself, but afterward, when Jasmine was approached by a young black pilot from a competing airline. "My carrier is implementing their version of Sky Equality next month," he told her. "It's not because they wanted to. It's because they had to. Customers are demanding it now. Employees are expecting it. You've changed the baseline for the entire industry." That night, in her hotel room, Jasmine reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple question about the location of a first-class lounge. What had started as one woman's experience of discrimination had catalyzed a movement that was gradually transforming an entire industry. The change wasn't complete, and it wasn't irreversible. It would require ongoing vigilance, continuous improvement, and unflagging commitment to the principle that everyone deserves equal dignity. But for the first time, Jasmine allowed herself to believe that the transformation might truly be sustainable, that the next generation of aviation professionals and travelers might experience an industry fundamentally different from the one she had entered. 2 years to the day after the incident, Jasmine implemented the final phase of her original vision, the Meridian Equality Scholarship Fund, providing full college funding for students of color pursuing careers in aviation. The inaugural class of 20 scholars represented the future she had been fighting for, a future where talent and determination, not race or background, would determine one's path in the industry. At the scholarship launch event, Jasmine shared the stage with an unexpected ally, Bridget Wilson. The former flight attendant, now serving as a Sky Equality trainer, had become an unlikely but effective advocate for change, her personal journey from resistance to understanding lending authenticity to her message. "I thought I was one of the good ones," Bridget told the audience, her honesty palpable. "I didn't see myself as prejudiced. It took being confronted with my own actions. Actions captured on video, witnessed by others, impossible to deny, for me to recognize patterns I'd been blind to my entire life. That recognition was painful, but necessary." As Jasmine listened, she reflected on how far they had all come, herself, Bridget, Meridian Airlines, and the industry itself. The journey had been neither straight nor smooth, with setbacks, resistance, and moments of doubt along the way. But standing there, witnessing the first generation of scholarship recipients who would enter an industry fundamentally changed from the one she had known, Jasmine felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The transformation wasn't perfect, and the victory wasn't complete. But it was real, it was significant, and most importantly, it was just the beginning. What's your reaction to Jasmine's story? Have you witnessed similar transformations in other industries? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe more companies should follow Meridian's example of addressing discrimination head-on, give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about overcoming adversity and creating positive change. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right can truly make a difference, even in the face of powerful opposition. Thank you for watching, and remember, dignity is not a privilege, it is a right. Jasmine Thompson's journey teaches us that meaningful change requires both courage and strategic vision. When faced with discrimination, she didn't simply seek personal vindication, she recognized a systemic problem that affected countless others. Her story demonstrates that positions of power come with responsibility, not just privilege. The resistance Jasmine encountered reveals how deeply entrenched discrimination can be within organizational cultures. Many prefer comfortable denial over uncomfortable truth. Yet her persistence proves that principled leadership can transform even the most resistant institutions. Perhaps most importantly, Jasmine's approach shows that addressing discrimination isn't just morally right, it's good business. By creating an environment where everyone is treated with equal dignity, Meridian Airlines improved customer satisfaction, employee retention, and financial performance. True change requires more than policy adjustments, it demands honest confrontation with uncomfortable realities. Jasmine's willingness to use her personal experience as a catalyst for broader reform demonstrates how individual actions can spark collective transformation. The story reminds us that dignity isn't something to be granted selectively based on appearance or status, it's a fundamental right that belongs to everyone, regardless of who they are or what they look like. What workplace discrimination have you witnessed or experienced? Share your story in the comments below. Has this account of Jasmine's courage inspired you to speak up against discrimination in your own environment? Like this video if you believe more companies should follow Meridian's example of addressing bias head-on. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about overcoming adversity and creating positive change. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right can truly make a difference, even when facing powerful opposition. Thank you for watching, and remember that your voice matters in the ongoing fight for equality and respect.